Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to the World Islamic Economic Forum 13th in Kuching, Sarawak, where you are all here in Borneo, and Borneo is a land renowned for its lush flora and fauna. Unique species that can never be found in any part of the world, these natural gifts of nature serve its purpose and are beneficial to the ecosystem. And of course, the people of Sarawak are wonderful, are beautiful, and also lovely. So today's session explains the potential of plants for medical purposes. And joining us are subject matter experts who will be able to shed more light on this progressive topic. Ladies and gentlemen, with the masterclass, Can Herbology Discover Cures for Tomorrow's Diseases? Please welcome Dr. Yeo Tiong Chia, Chief Executive Officer of Sarawak Biodiversity Centre Malaysia, and Dr. Anirban Sukul, Director, Sukul Institute of Homeopathy Research, India. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, I hand over the session to Dr. Yeo Tiong Chia.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saleh. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank WIEF for this invitation to speak here. It is definitely a privilege on this opportunity to be here with you. Yeah. I think the MC has introduced the Sarawak biodiversity by its name. So what I'm going to start off with is something very, very common to all of us. It can be a very frightening slide, but I hope it's not too bad, okay? All right, now this is a slide that was put up by Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's the director of the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Disease in USA. He put this up in 2016, and at that time, he wanted to convince the policymakers to invest or to put in more funding for research on diseases. Now, if you look at the slides, I can count about 15 diseases that are new, and there are about 19 diseases that are re-emerging. So all these diseases, in actual fact, has the capacity to actually break out into an epidemic or a pandemic, and it can cause a lot of hardship to the people. Yeah, and most of these diseases, it's quite unusual in terms that they do not have a cure, and they do not have current effective medicines for it. Yeah, in the WHO report quite recently, it says that if there's a global crisis in terms of an infectious disease outbreak, it would have threatened hundreds of millions of people just because of the way the world is now interconnected. Yeah? And even with that, we would think about diseases as something that we have to deal with quite efficiently and quite effectively. Now, a lot of diseases, such as malaria and all that, there's a very key statistics that the UNICEF people has always used, and that was, for every 30 seconds, a child in Africa would die of an infection of malaria. So that's very profound. In terms of other diseases that is up and coming, which we all worried about and which we read in the newspaper, is the failure to address the problem of antibiotic resistance. And antibiotic resistance is pretty much resulting from people or the industry who use antibiotic indiscriminately. And they estimated that 10 million of people would die by 2050 if that problem is not taken care of. And in terms of the global impact, it has a big global impact in terms of trillions of dollars. So as a global community, what are we doing, actually, to look at this problem and to find solutions for it, yeah? Well, to make matter worse, if you look at the number of drugs that is approved for the last decade, it has been averaging about 30 per year, all right? Now, last year in 2016, that was surprising in terms that the number of drugs approved actually fell from the 30 average to about 22 drugs. So that's very concerning. Well, you know, in terms of what we can do here in this part of the world, this is a good point for me now to introduce what Sarawak Biodiversity does. We have a very novel vision. Our vision is to enrich lives with breakthrough innovations in biodiversity. Our mission is to decode biodiversity for the benefit of mankind. And our activity is bioprospecting. So what is the meaning of bioprospecting? Bioprospecting means that it is actually the search for and commercialization of new products from nature. So this is what we have been doing since 1997. Yeah? And we are the first state in the country of Malaysia to actually set up a law on biodiversity research and also regulation of biodiversity for commercial purposes. Now, we have long have this notion of what are the fantastic things that probably we can do in this part of the world, in Sarawak, on the island of Borneo, because we are quite isolated from the rest of the world. So there's two compelling reasons of what we're going to do at the Sarawak Biodiversity that led us down this pathway to look at research on herbs and research on natural product discovery. Sorry, it's not moving. Okay, here we go. All right. So there are two compelling reasons. One of the reasons is because in Sarawak, there's about 20 ethnic groups living here. It's indigenous community that has their own language, their own livelihood, and their own practices. So it's a very diverse communities, and each one of them have very distinctive culture that they follow. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is because how do you put it back on? The other reason is because in Sarawak, we have a very diverse biodiversity. If you look at the biodiversity in Sarawak, they have recorded 5,500 flowering plants. And a lot of these flowering plants are actually herbal in nature, right? And there are trees also that bears different types of fruits that are very unique to this part of the world. Now, if you put the diverse population and a diverse biodiversity together, and over the generation, what really comes out of it is something really fantastic. And that is the traditional knowledge. Well, I'll let them set up. Essentially, traditional knowledge is something that is a very rich source of information, and that has been documented over generations. And most of this include a lot of information on how the indigenous community uses the plants for medicinal applications. Okay, we are back on. So in terms of diversity in Sarawak, if you look at the forest ecosystem, there are 8 different types of forest ecosystem. And this is where the indigenous community live very intimately with the forest, and this is where they derive their indigenous knowledge. Yeah? Maybe you can control the slides from there, please. Next slide. All right, so I talked about traditional knowledge just now, and it is a rich source of information on plants that are used as herbs in medicinal applications. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a picture that is actually the start of a drug discovery process. Yeah? It is one of the trips and expedition that we made into the interior. To get to this place, I just want to share with you how difficult it is to go in there, document the traditional knowledge, and also collect the plants. It takes us 4 hours by 4-wheel drive, and 3 hours on the river, depending on how high is the river. That's how long it takes to go to this place to document the traditional knowledge and also to collect the plants. Next slide, please. Now, why do we have to go to so far to collect traditional knowledge? You know, you can collect it anywhere. Well, I'll tell you the reason why later. But if you are walking in a jungle like me, if I'm looking at this picture, this is what I see. Okay? Now, when you walk along the jungle with a traditional knowledge practitioner, it's a very different story. And this is what they see. Next slide, please. All right. So when you walk along the jungle with a traditional knowledge practitioner, they see different things. They can tell you what are the plants that they use for food, what are the plants they use for antidotes in case they take something that is poisonous, they need to get to the antidote. And there are a lot of plants which the traditional knowledge people use for bleeding, for broken bones, for stopping bleeding also. And these are the common things that you are faced in the jungle. So this knowledge is very important for us as a very first step towards drug discovery and also looking at the herbs that they have used. Yeah? Next slide, please. Now, when we work with the community, we first work with the headman together with the community, which form a group that would document the knowledge together with SPC. And we did it on a very rigorous format in terms that we have to do prior informed consent, which means that they have to agree to what we are going to do with them. And some of the communities might not agree in the beginning, but later on when they see the value of it, they will come on board and also do the documentation with us. Not only we have to do prior informed consent, we have to, at the end of the day, we have to sign a benefit sharing agreement with them if the herbs is commercialized. Yeah? Next slide. Now, all in all, if you heard just now, there are 28 indigenous communities in Sarawak. So if you look at the third line down, we have documented from 16 indigenous communities, and we have a few more to go. But the daunting thing is that, you know, we only did this at about 78 villages. In Sarawak, there are 5,000 villages. So there are many more for us to go. And the number of plants we documented is about 5,000. And a lot of these plants are new species, so it's very hard to identify them. So we only have identified about 1,700 species. Yeah? Next slide. In terms of the plants usage, what we saw was there's a lot of plants that are used medicinally. Others are used as craft and also used as poison too, you know? And there are a lot of plants that has fragrances, which is quite interesting, and also quite related to what companies nowadays are looking for, unique fragrances. And of course, you know, from what we have documented, we realize that the communities that has the most knowledge are the ones that still lives very near to the jungle or very close to the jungle. And one of the groups of indigenous community called the Penans. The Penans, some of the groups are still wanderers in the jungle, and they are the people who has the most traditional knowledge from our experience. Next slide, please. When we document the traditional knowledge, we'll bring the plants back and it will be processed at the center. We separate out the different parts of the plants. Next slide. And we would dry them after the solvent extraction, and then we put them into little bottles with barcoding. Next slide. Now this is what it looks like at the center. We have rows and rows of these little bottles of extracts that pharmaceutical company would be interested in screening them. Next slide. Overall, our library looks like this. Not only we have plants, we have a library of algae, and also we have a library of essential oils, which I'll talk a little bit about later on. And this is a very good resource for research. Next slide. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to talk about 3 plants quickly. This plant is called Aglaya stellatopilosa. It has a very active ingredient called silvestrol, and silvestrol was recently tested to be very effective in anti-cancer screen. The latest on this particular compound, which is patented by the Shrug government, is that a group in Germany has tested this compound against Ebola, the Ebola virus, and it seems to be quite effective, so we have some hope for it. Not only we document medicinal plants, we also document plants that are used for other purposes. Next slide. This is an interesting plant that we documented that the community has used to make somebody fall in love with you, yeah? So anybody who wants to try out this plant, yes, by all means, go ahead. I did not try it. It's quite interesting that you have to use this plant to throw it against the back of the person who you're interested in. And if he or she turns around, then it's love at first sight, yeah? Guarantee, yeah? Now, the plants that I did try is the next one. Next slide. This is a plant called Hanguana malayana. It is used for ringworm and infection. As for ringworm infection, it's always very itchy and it's all inflamed, so the community would use it, cut it, and apply it. And after that, the itch would go away. So one day, I was kind of curious, so I took one of the fruits there and I took a bite. And from that bite, my mouth was numb for 6 hours. And everything that I taste, including water or anything like that, it tasted salty. So that is quite an interesting bioactivity that we are currently looking at. And of course, because of the numbing effect of this fruit, that's why when the community use it on ringworm infection, they are able to get rid of the itch. That is the most likely explanation that I can think of. Next slide, please. Now, the idea with the small little bottles of extracts is that we would collect them and we would send it all over the world for screening so that if there's a hit, we can develop that candidate to become a drug so that it can go out to the market and hopefully can target some of the emerging and re-emerging diseases that I spoke of earlier. Next slide. We have a lot of collaborations, 30 in all over the world in Malaysia, and hopefully one of them would be successful. Now, for the last 4 minutes of my talk, I'm going to show you a video, and this video is more or less about the approach to drug discovery. Yeah? But in this particular case, we are talking about the discovery of a very interesting essential oil. And we actually have a booth downstairs that is displaying this essential oil if you're interested. And I hope you enjoy the video, okay? Thank you.
This is the story of Litsara and how a wonderful plant used by the indigenous communities came to be known to all of us. It was in year 2005 when Sarawak Biodiversity Centre's research officer, Margarita Naming, and her team were working with the Lun Bawang of Long Telingan, some 3.5 hours by road from Lawas town to document their precious traditional knowledge. Walking through the forest alongside her were the then director of SBC, Eileen Yen, and Dr. Francis Ng, a botanical expert. When suddenly, a refreshing and citrusy scent filled their senses. The knowledgeable community members, Ukong Ta'i and his father, the late Ta'i Puret, led them to a tree which bare little berry-like fruits and leaves that emanate an invigorating scent. "Ah, yes," said Ukong and his father. "The tenam fruits are used in our cooking, adding flavor and fragrance to our dishes, while fruits and leaves also relieve us of our backaches and stomach aches." And thus came the documentation of the tenam tree, as it is known among the Lunbawang and Kalabit, and Paka to the Bidayu, who use it for the same purposes. And so, with the community's consent, SBC collected the plant materials and set about to extract this revitalizing scented essential oil at its labs here in Semenggol. But wait, there is a close relative of this plant found in China, where they call it Mei Chang. In the botanical world, we call it Litsea cubeba. But could there be more than just a botanical connection to the plant in China? Well, let's compare what they have to what we have. It turns out the oil contains different chemicals, probably due to geographical differences. The components in the oil has antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory properties, and could repel insects, besides bearing a scent that invigorates, rejuvenates, and inspires. What wonderful news! Could this be Borneo's very own new multi-purpose oil? Even experts in the United States to whom we sent the oil had remarked that it is a beautiful oil. Thus, our distinctive oil composition gave us reason enough to register the species as unique to Sarawak through Intellectual Property Protection as a geographical indication (GI) for Sarawak Litsea. We then went on to trademark this wonderful oil as Litsara, a combination of the tree's species name Litsea and the name Sarawak. But wait, there was much more to be done. How do we share Litsara among the 5 communities who have worked so hard with SBC to sustainably conserve and develop the plant and oil? The 5 communities who are the Bidayu of Kampong Kiding in the Padawan Range, the Lunbawang of the upriver village of Long Kerabangan, Lawas, the Lunbawang in the serene rainforest of Long Telingan, Lawas, the Kalabit of Palungan amongst the misty mountains of Barrio, and the Kalabit of Pa Ukat in the cool rolling hills of Barrio. Well, worry not, as Sarawak is the first in Malaysia to have included provisions for access and benefit sharing in its laws to sustainably develop its biodiversity. We channel back equitable sharing of benefits to these communities involved and acknowledge them for their unwavering support in bringing Litsara up. We also acknowledge and thank the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment Malaysia and the United Nations Development Programme UNDP for their assistance in the project. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Sarawak's pride and joy. Litsara invigorates, rejuvenates, inspires.
Thank you, Dr. Yeo. Assalamu alaikum, and a very good morning to all of you. First, I'd like to thank the organizers, the government of Malaysia, the state government of Sarawak, and the WIEF for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak over here. I'll be putting the same topic in a different manner. Since I have a background of of studying post-graduation in zoology, and thereafter I got PhD in neuropharmacology, and then I studied homeopathy. So I have a background of both researching and with this plant origin of plant drugs, so that I handle together both. So I practice homeopathy since 1999. So I've seen so many patients, and I deal with so many patients with these herbal medicines. I'm also the honorary physician at the Ministry of Public Health in the government of Thailand. See, there have been a good surge of using this herbal medicine in the past decades, I can say. You know, these hazards of using these Western medicines, and the people, they now have come up with, the awareness have come up that they know all the hazards that it happens of taking these Western medicines. I think it's not always working, so can you please handle my slides from there? Can I have my next slide, please? So we know that the hazards of taking the Western medicines, and most of it, they're costly. So herbal medicines, on the other side, they do not damage our body. So they do not pose any threat to our vital organs like kidneys, liver, and they are quite compatible with our immune body system. Moreover, since this is a cost-effective, so it can be easily reached to the people and those who live in the rural areas. And of course, there is a good challenge to handle with the new diseases that are yet to come, that will be coming, and that has all very recently come up, like the genetic disorders. They will not cured by the Western medicines, and I have seen patients with genetic disorders, so that have been cured. A child, I can remember, is being cured with these herbal medicines. Not only these genetic disorders, the other disorders like cancers. You see, the cancer have nowadays a tremendous, you can see we are scary of any disease, and I can see patients, they have some burning sensation in this tongue, and they seem that it being a cancer, so they cannot utter the word cancer. Then they just try to ask me that, doctor, whether it is good or whether it is bad. Bad means cancer. So how much they are being scary. And of course, herbal medicine has a good answer for this cancer, all types of cancer. I'll show it to you. Next slide. So I just give you an example that how these herbal medicines are really, really accepting to the world. And you can see a projected value until 2024. And on last year, 2016, it has been more than a business of 71 billion US dollar. And more importantly, it has been increasing. So every year it increasing. In other words, the acceptance to the herbal medicine is increasing every year by the common people. So you can see at the bottom, there will be the tablets and capsules. There are powders, there are extracts, and there are others like lotions, cream, and the cosmetic herbal medicines that are being really doing great in these days. And there are some new drugs or new plants is going to discover, and that will have some good effect on the medicinal value. Next slide, please. So I just show you some brief, so few slides that are really I have found in my practice is being good. Aconite or aconitum has cardiac stimulant, and it has anti-rheumatic property. Also, it's a good anti-inflammatory, and there is distributed in the Himalayan region, and the parts that is being collected is the tubers. Next slide. And Allium sativum is, you take it every day, so it's a very potential for hypertensions and anti-hyperlipidemic property, platelet aggregations, and they are distributed widely in the Central Asia. And next slide. Burberry's Ristretto, although there are other species of Burberry's that I use, they are good for the renal calculus, and they have their anti-rheumatic property as well. So the stem and bark and root extract of the bark root being used, and is being widely found in India. Next slide, please. Viscom album, this I think is the most important as this is relates to the cancer disorders. So commonly known as mistletoe, and there are several manufacturers, especially in Germany, and they are extracting this mistletoe. This is a parasitic plant, and they are doing good extracts and almost covering all types of cancers. I have been doing this extract in my practice and found quite well. There are 3 types of mistletoes, A, P, and M. So it differs as the tree of the host differs. Next slide. Strychnoxnux vomica is a good medicine, or good extract for the alcohol addiction, and it has a good medicine for sleeplessness. So it is distributed in India and Southeast Asia. Next slide. Gymnema sylvestri, you know, this diabetes is an epidemic nowadays, and India is considered to be the diabetic capital. So Gymnema sylvestri is most potent I have found in diabetes. Next slide, please. The Syzygium also is being quite good with these diabetic patients and quite effective in lowering the blood sugar. Next slide. Holorenia is mainly considered as anti-dysentery properties, but I found in diabetes also, so it has a potent effect on lowering the blood sugar. It has been found in India and Malaysia. Next slide. Rauwolfia as well, because you see, these diabetes and hypertension or high blood sugar is very common nowadays. People are crossing after 30, 35 of years age, so they are being caught with these stress-related disorders. So Rauwolfia is a very good medicine for hypertension. Next slide, please. Passiflora, you know, I mentioned that it is being insomnia, and like in Strychnoxnux vomica, Passiflora is good medicine as well. Also, this is for the Parkinson's and other neural disorders. So it has been distributed mostly in the United States, in the southeast part of the United States. And asparagus, it's an erectile dysfunction for the male. So this is quite common because also the stress-related, it's a lifestyle disorders mostly. So asparagus extract has been good for this. Next slide. Panax, or commonly called ginseng, is widely accepted. Distributed here also. There is Chinese ginseng also, and mostly they are doing with the stress and diabetes and neural disorders, also the sexual dysfunction. So this is how a new drug can be achieved, or can a new drug, if and when, or rather a new herb is found, and then how can it be transferred from a herb to a medicine. So if I get a single herb, then I have to get the extraction, maybe water, ethanolic, or maybe both. The extracts you get, the bioactivity directed fractionation and isolation, and then you get the active principles, and then you only have the active structures. And with these active structures, you pass through the clinical trials, some clinical analog synthesis, and then you get this new medicine. The same thing almost has come up when you have this more than one herbs, I mean, the formulations of herbs, you have the same procedure to pass through to get a new medicine. So this is, you can see the principal concept of doing research of new medicines. So next slide, please. I now come up with an experiment that I did, or rather we did in our laboratory. You see, alcoholism is a global problem. So addiction of alcohol, you can say, is a global problem. And it not only is a problem for the person who is taking this alcohol, but with the person who is with his family and his surroundings. So the society is facing the problem with this addiction. There are several symptoms of overdose of alcohol or alcohol addiction. There are blurred speech will come out of, and then there will be the double vision, and there is another is the loss of lighting reflex. So what is lighting reflex? You see, I'm standing here erect. So it does mean that my lighting reflex is correct. So if I lose my lighting reflex, I'll tend to fall. And if I lost my lighting reflex, I'll just lie down on the floor. So alcohol can do this. Alcohol induces the loss of lighting reflex. And Nux vomica, seeds of Nux vomica has the property of anti-alcoholic property. So we extracted the seeds of Nux vomica and made it dilutions. With the dilutions, we take one part from the ethanolic extracts of the seeds, and put 99 parts of the 90% ethanol, make 10 downward strokes to make potency 1, Nux vom potency 1. Like this way, the subsequent potencies has been prepared by taking the one part from the previous potency and putting this 99 parts of the 90% ethanol to make the 2, 3, 4, like this way it goes. Next slide, please. So we have to create, when you use this animal model, a mouse model, we have mouse, they are not alcohol addicted. So we have to create the addiction to the mouse, or to the mice batch. So what we did, we put the ethanol injection through the intraperitoneal injection at 4 gram per kg body weight to the mouse. And then we put the oral treatment of Nux vomica in the diluted form. So here you can see that how a mouse is being treated orally with Nux vomica. 200 is the potency, so serial dilution, you can say. Next slide, please. And this is the result for it. You see, on the left side is the alcohol, and it is being, the loss of writing reflex is being considered in terms of sleep time. The time it remains in the lost state, lost of writing reflex state, or the remain in the lying posture until it restores, until it's restored. So it calls the sleep time. It's not the normal sleep that we enjoy every night, but it's a remain of losing its writing reflex state. So you can see when you give the alcohol injection, it has more than 75 minutes of sleep time. And when you treat with Nux vomica 30, giving with the intraperitoneal injections with alcohol, it has come down. The loss of writing reflex has come down. So the effect of alcohol becomes less when you treat it with Nux vom 30. Next slide, please. Here we have another experiment. You can see on the left side is the control. And then we get the Nux vom 30 prepared with 90% ethanol. Nux vom 30 then prepared with pure water, so no ethanol was adding there, only serial dilution with water. And then Nux vom 30 prepared with pure ethanol. So I just tell you the result only, because you see when Nux vom 30 is being prepared with aqueous ethanol or 90% ethanol, has been the most effective in lowering the addiction, lowering the toxic effect of alcohol. Next slide, please. And this is the intake of alcohol in toads. On the extreme top, you will find the control. Just below it, you will have the Nux vom 30 given through the intraperitoneal route. So you'll find that all the similar effect, control and the intraperitoneal route doesn't have any effect at all. Well, you come down there next on the third from the top, you will find Nux vom 1000 potency given through the oral route, and it has lowering the intake also. When used Nux vom 30, just on the fourth line, bottom line, is Nux vom 30. So it is more effective in lowering the intake. So it not only reduces the alcohol toxic properties, but it also put you in a reluctance. So it also has a mental effect that, no, I'll not drink alcohol. So this exactly what it shows in Nux vom in toads. Next slide, please. I now go through my next part, this clinical part, as I practice homeopathy. So I just give you an example of a marvelous case history that I cured with the SMA syndrome. SMA syndrome is superior mesenteric artery syndrome. So we have this abdominal artery, and we have the mesenteric artery. So when it overlaps with each other and tying a knot, it obstructs the food to pass into our intestine. I have been called in Bangkok, in Thailand, with the same symptom, with the same disease of a 28-year-old boy who has been admitted for more than 30 days when I was called, and he was having septicemia for the third time, and he was just on the verge of death. He was just between the death, so everybody was just putting their hand and surrender, and the position I entered in. And this is the marvel of herbal medicine can do. So next slide, please. These are the symptoms, and I'm not going into the details. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So the patient was first detected with Crohn's disease because he was having the pain. So this is the report from that Somitibet hospital. It is a 5-star hospital in Bangkok. Then next slide, please. Then you will find there is the tube, insertion tube, on the nasojejunal tube, and that there were over 4 tubes were having the protein, the carbohydrate, the minerals, and water. Because if the intestinal wall is so thin, is like just a paper, if a single piece of rice can enter into it, it will just pierce through the intestinal wall and it come to the peritoneal cavity, giving the leading inflammation and leading the cause of death. So the doctors were not risking at all. They were putting everything through the liquid form with the tubes. Next slide. And here it is clearly being seen with the CT report that SMS syndrome, suggestive of SMS syndrome, you can see at the bottom in the patient. So this is confirmed that this disease has happened. And you can see this report is of 26 January in 2017. And I was called in after that, in the end of January or beginning of February. And from then onward, this treatment has been started. So I first gave, since he was having septicemia, so I first gave medicines to come out of the death, because the patient has to survive, then only you can treat. So septicemia medicines were given, and the patient was survived, and then I started treatmenting of this SMS syndrome. So next slide, please. Next slide. And you can see this is a March report. It is clearly been written that almost complete resolution of duodenal obstruction. There is no obstruction at all. So no SMS syndrome, no tying of this arteries. So the patient is now having this solid foods, started taking solid foods, started gaining weight, and the patient was really survived. Next slide, please. So this is a case of herbal that I tried with the mistletoe I mentioned you. It's a case of uterine cancer, USG report. Next slide. You can see it's in the impression that CA, cancer of cervix, means uterus. And it's a known case of cancer of cervix, and there is no significant mass effect is seen. This is after treatment with this mistletoe and the other homeopathy medicines. Next slide, please. I now pass quickly through few slides to my patients that is being cured with this herbal medicine. Thuja, you know, is a very potent tree for reducing the tumors. You can see the tumors is here. Is here tumor, and you can see there is no more tumor. Next slide. It's a case of leukoderma. You see white patches here, and you see the patient is getting cured. Still under my treatment, these medicines were used: Thuja, Lycopodium, Chelidonium, and Calcarea carp. Next slide, please. There's a case of leukoderma again on the fingertips. You can see there's white patches on the down, and you can see the pinkish color is coming out. So yet to come the skin color, but you can see it's a good change. This same medicine, Burberry, is added here. Next slide. It's a case of tumor. It's a cystic tumor. You see here it is, and it was burst in within 3 months of treating with Thuja, Arnica, Hypericum. These are all plants, you know. Next slide. This is another you see tumor here, and it's a reducing state. With the same medicine, Calcarea floor is being added here. Next slide. It's a case of psoriasis. Psoriasis, it doesn't cure. So it's very difficult to, very few cases of psoriasis get cured. So you see, this is patch of psoriasis, and now it is being developing with the medicine improvement. Next slide. See the arthritis in the deformed state, in the advanced state. You can see the little finger is being deformed, and after with the medicine of Thuja, Rastox, Arnica, and Colchicum, the structure also being easier than before. Next slide. There's a case of skin cancer being treated with this mistletoe and Thuja and Euphrasia. You see here, and you see here. Still under my treatment. Next slide. Case of alopecia, loss of hair loss. See the development. Next slide. A tumor again with the Thuja, and it burst out. It later healed up with these medicines, Arnica, Thuja. Next slide. It's a severe case that was advised to ampute the legs, and the patient was scary to get this amputation. So she came to me, and you can see the severity of the ulcer. You can see the edema, the swelling, and you can see the development. Slowly, it started developing, and the whole ulcer has been healed up with the natural medicines. So this is the marvel of natural medicine. Ossimum sanctum was used, curcuma was used, Arnica, and Thuja again. Next slide, please. So these are again reports of the multiple fibroids in uterus of a patient, and the same patient, next slide, with retroversion of uterus. So no multiple fibroids were there with these medicines, pulsatilla, lycopodium, calcarea, Thuja. Next slide, please. So I just quickly passed through how this alternative medicine or how this herbal medicine is being considered in the Western world. You see, this is a field clinic in Germany. I went there in an invitation last year. Next slide. Is the inside of the field clinic. You see, this is a tree, and it is full of sunlight. It's quite natural. Next slide, please. Is it on the hilltop, on the top of the hill, so you'll have every touch of the environment. Next slide. You see the rooms inside where the patients get admitted. See, the window is open with a glass window. It's a see-through window, so you can see every touch, and they really emphasize on the attraction and the attachment of the environment with the patient. Next slide, please. There is the director, Stephen Hiller. Next slide. And this is another hospital in Paracelsus Hospital in Germany. You can see how it's a well-built hospital. Next slide. And it is only this alternative medicine is being used here, no other medicines, no Western medicine. And the same concept is here also with the touch of environment. The patients are here. Next slide, please. You see although it's being an alternative medicine hospital, but it's quite, the infrastructure is quite good. It's most modern equipped. Next slide. And this is another hospital in Glasgow. So this is also, you can see the environment around. It's not in a congested city inside, so it's being quite vacant land around, so it's being quite touched with the environment. Next slide, please. It's inside of the Glasgow hospital. See how well built. Next slide. The same concept here also I found, the attachment of environment, attachment of the greeneries with the patients. Next slide, please. So I've been visited the same to see a patient at the Royal London Homeopathic Hospital, Integrated Hospital Medicine. So next slide, and this is you see the consultation room. It's being so simple. Next slide. And next slide, please. This is a book that we have been researched, and it's an outcome of our research work. My father, he has written this book, High Dilution Pharmacology and Homeopathy. Next slide. And this is another book authored by myself with my father, High Dilution Effects, Physical and Biochemical Basis, published by Clore Academic Publishers. Next, please. This book was so popular that it has been translated into an Italian version. I'm sorry, I cannot read it out. Next slide. I just make you a notice, few announcement sort of thing, that we publish a journal on this alternative medicine called Clinical and Experimental Homeopathy. If you some are interested, you can send me the manuscript. We will consider. Next slide. And you can say it's a holy place for we the homeopath. The inventor, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, is the cemetery in Paris. Next slide. Then I really thank you very much for patient hearing. Thank you again.
Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Dr. Yeo Tiong Chia and Dr. Anirban Sukul. So ladies and gentlemen, we would like now to open the floor for some question and answer session, where I believe some of you definitely have some questions would you like to ask these two handsome gentlemen. May I have you can raise your hands and we can send the microphone to you, especially on any future diseases. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Maybe for Dr. Yeo, just your commercialization plan moving forward, how do you plan to work with other pharmaceutical companies in Malaysia in particular? Thank you. And the one for Dr. Sukul, perhaps your cure for hair loss, that would be a great solution for many of us.
Thank you. I think you look very familiar, sir. Okay. In terms of commercialization, what we intend to do is you got to have IP over the compounds that you discovered, from the traditional knowledge documentation work all the way through research. As far as we at this point in time, our commercialization stage is usually working together with companies to put out products that have not gone through the pharmaceutical pathway. And let's say if a drug has gone out of patent and they would like to look for alternative organisms in the rainforest that makes the same compound. And that is something that we would be interested in working with pharmaceuticals in Malaysia to come up with new generics and market it in that way. Other than the approach, I still think that the approach of having the herbal remedy very well regulated and dosage that are well defined would be a nicer way to go about treating patients. And that is something that we are thinking very hard along and we are pursuing, yeah? But I hope I answer your question, yeah?
Thank you, Answer Dr. Sri, for your question.
Oh.
Yes, please. For the hair loss, see, of course, there are medicines on the hair loss, and there are several extensive and case of hair loss in a child, maybe around 10, 12 years old. And age is a problem, of course. So even the child cases, they are being totally cured. Totally cured. So the problem is that we do not have any specific medicine for a specific disease. Of course, there are some indications of medicines, but there is no such specific. But yes, of course, depending on, because we deal with the symptoms, not with the disease per se. Chelidonium majus is a good medicine for this hair loss. Lycopodium is as well. Thuja again as well. So these three, I believe, really doing good in this treatment of hair loss. Hair loss is different, and that which I showed is different. So hair loss, it happens throughout the head, and that was alopecia areata, it's called. So that it happens from a particular part of a head. So that one again is a different symptom. So anyway, these three can be considered with good potent for hair loss or hair growth in terms of hair growth. It can stop the hair loss and also regrowth the hair. That's it.
Maybe I can pick up something more in reference to Mr. Wahid's punya question. I think having a remedy and having a substance that can be commercialized is much easier and faster. Now, if you look at my slides there, last year, the total number of approved drugs is 22 in the whole world. So in order to get something up there and have it as an approved drug, the chances of that is very, very, very low. Yeah? And how many people in the universities are doing experiments and trying to get to the same goal? So we think that chances are very low, but something like a herbal remedy for hair loss. In our case, we have a herb that you can take, and as you drink alcohol, you don't get drunk, you know? Or different types of application, food application from the herbs that we documented. That is probably the easier way to shortcut and get to the market.
Does that
There
answer
are
your question,
some.
Tansby?
I'm sorry.
This question to Dr. Anirban. When I see the two studies that you've done for the, one is for the alcoholism, you're using what's the difference between the mix between the 90% ethanol with the herbs and with the 100% pure alcohol? Why is just the 10% that's different in terms of result? It's almost 100% difference. That's the first question. The second question, most of the treatment that you use a lot of tuja. What is the significance of tuja itself in the treatment? Even as you said to Dr. Sri Wahid, for the remedy for hair, you're also saying about tuja. Is it have a similar compound or have the similar trait for stem cell? Thank you.
It's a very good question that you raised regarding the first one, that while being with the 90%, using this 90% ethanol, and while you use this absolute ethanol, no water. So why this such difference? And difference is really a lot. It's not the point of 10%, it's of the point of addition of water. So if you could have used, instead of 90%, if you could have used the 70%, the result would have been same, almost same. But yes, this is the standard procedure of making the drugs. It's not my choice that I put 90%, but it is the standard procedure mentioned in the pharmacopoeia that 90% aqueous ethanol. You have to put 10% water and put 90% ethanol to prepare this medicine in serial dilution. So this is one. So, but the why? The reason is that while it comes with the water, and you know, ethanol is a so it's highly polarized. So when it comes into the polar, it gets the molecules of hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. It gets bonded, and so it all depends upon the bonds, hydrogen bonds especially. So this how it acts with the differs. The hydrogen bond differs with the potency like 30 to 100. Hydrogen bond differs with Nux vomica, thuja, and others. So it all depends on the hydrogen bond, and it only comes when it happens to be together in form of water and ethanol. Regarding your second question, as I told you, I'm a homeopathy doctor. Homeopathy does mean a lot in terms of mental state. So even with case of child, if the child is crying all the time, we do not see any other symptoms. For the crying and he has to be carried, only then this cry has to stop. So this is a specific symptom. So the child is getting irritated all the time, that's why he cries all the time. So this we take, this sort of things. Thuja is considered, this medicine is considered a psychotic medicine, so it has a lot to do on the mental state. So, you know, this, once you have this disorder, even if you have a fever for 3-4 days, we are mentally down. We are mentally not good, not feeling 100% but mentally down. Oh, I have to do this work. I am now sitting at home. So we are mentally very disturbed. Once you feel for prolonged, this 3 days to 30 days, you are mentally more down. So once we are getting a chronic disorder, we are mentally, not say imbalanced, but mentally not good, not 100%. So Thuja is thought to be, since it's an antipsychotic drug, so, and when this psychotic blocks are there, the other medicines will not work. So Thuja is some sort of clearance of this mental block, a psychotic block. So once it works, but definitely Thuja, you can say it's a drug of choice for the tumors. It's a drug of choice for the tumors. I just explained to you this way, but even if this is absent, not on all patients this will find, but even this case is absent, Thuja will work. So the same thing happens in the hair loss also. Hair loss, it's more mental. When you have a baldy hair and you are at 30s, 40s, early age, so you will feeling so embarrassed when sitting in. You will started feeling slowly, and it goes. So this is again a psychotic mental pressure always. He may tell you that, no, I'm not feeling, it's more in the woman. So if they are getting this hair loss. So again, if this blocks, I don't clear, the other medicine will not act. So I have to give this Thuja first in higher potency, maybe in repeated forms. So then only the chelidonium and these things, lycopodium, that will act together better. I hope I cleared it.
Doctor, I'm coming back to the crowning glory. Where can we buy this medicine? And there are so many in the market now, sometimes with whether to consume or not to consume, to apply or not to apply. For a man like us, it's very important to have hair. I come from a family of 10. None of them lost hair except me. So I would like to know what's the reason.
These medicines, there are several companies in India that they produce these homeopathic medicines and herbal medicines. So in India is very easy to buy. So in my place there are a lot of companies that they produce these medicines. So it's very common in India. Even in Malaysia, they import the medicines from Germany and from Pakistan, I think, as well, few from India also. So it's easily available. It's not like that, so it's easily available. And regarding the applications, which I mentioned, all the medicines were in the form of oral administration. It's not for the applying on the hair, not on the applying on the tumor, none whatsoever. So it's all, you consume it, and then it works. So wherever your problem is, maybe here, wherever. So regarding the application, yes, of course, the Arnica montana oil, there is an oil of Arnica montana, and that really helps in terms of applications of this herbal oil. And yes, age is a good factor. So once you cross this age of having new growth of the hair follicles, this will not happen. So I showed you a young woman who is 32 years of age. So that she has been suffering for this. And so, this age is considered to be a factor.
Thank you very much. Due to some sufficient time, probably after this, we can have a separate session with him later on. Is that okay with you? Yes, sir? Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Dr. Yeo and Dr. Anirban, for dissecting the topic comprehensively and planting such great interest within the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite both our speakers for a group photo. So, ladies and gentlemen, while they take the group photo, please do participate in the series of panel discussions and masterclasses lined up for the rest of the day, and visit the exhibition booths at the exhibition hall in level 1. And also please take note, ladies and gentlemen, that tonight there will be a Soundscape Concert Mocha Fest, which will be happening at 8 p.m. and hope to see you there. And for those who wish to have more hair after this, you can talk to the doctor. No problem.